change my paper first. Okay, so, and these guys, bless their hearts, we did a prep call. We always do a prep call with our panelists, so everyone kind of has an idea what everyone's going to talk about at least a little bit. At least you get a general idea of who's going to go rogue in the group before you get here. Because there's always someone who goes rogue, so there's no telling it. So it's like a little teaser. You get to determine which one of us are going to go rogue today. So guys, what I'd like to do is first ask you, please share, Stephen, I'll have you start, share a bit about yourself with us, including your role with your company and your background in healthcare or estate planning.
Okay. My name is it on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My name is Steve Cortes. I've been an attorney for now 25 years. I can't believe it. I remember when I first started and other attorneys getting their 25-year pin, and I guess it's time for me to get mine. When I got out of law school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but this was kind of the one area of law that I really enjoyed because I got to build a relationship with my clients. And I think in healthcare, and that's kind of what we're helping you do is plan for your healthcare, right? Is that I get to build a relationship. So as your life changes, you need to pick somebody who. Do you have a question? No? Okay.
This group's pretty well trained. They're going to save all their questions to the
end. To the end?
Yep.
Okay,
and
perfect.
They know the Q&A session, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess in 2013, I started my own law firm, and I've been doing it ever since, doing estate planning, and we also do probates and trust administration. But obviously, it's a lot easier for the family and for the individual if they do their estate planning ahead of time.
Okay. Very good. Well, I'm impressed about that 25-year pin.
It's scary.
No, I'm impressed. We're going to run with impressed and not scared. Okay, Lisa, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I don't really like microphones, so if I have to use my mom voice, I will. My name's Lisa Ritchie. I work for Senior Care Referral Services. I've been in senior care, honestly, about 13 years now in different capacities. It was definitely a career change for me. I was in broadcast journalism before, so that's a major switch. But it was something that I was called to by a friend. I started out helping a family or helping a company that does private duty in the home grow their business. I did that for several years. I went with home health after that. But for the last 6 years, I've been doing advising for families when it comes to senior living, when it comes to independent, assisted, memory, and long-term care. With that has come growing a lot of resources. So our name, Senior Care Referral Services, we refer to a lot of different things, including elder law, including private duty, home health, hospice, skilled nursing, all kinds of things that come up when someone's having to make that decision on whether or not it is safe to go home. Sometimes they make that choice on their own. Unfortunately, more times than not, an accident or something happens that forces them to make that decision. So that's probably what we do more of, is quick placements. But we also help people that are just looking for the future and they know it might be something that's coming. It's getting harder to take care of the house. It's getting harder to do all the things. And maybe this would be a good option. So we start showing them what those things look like. And we're free. So it doesn't cost the families anything.
Well, that's great. You can sure tell that you were broadcast journalists because you got the voice down. So good job. That's always helpful. Okay, so we're going to start with you, Lisa. Tell us what type of emergency situations do you most often hear from people, and how do they want your help?
I feel like I can do this very easily after our call on Friday, because after we got off our little Zoom call Friday, I took about 5 calls in one day of people that were being discharged from skilled within a week and need somewhere to go. So I toured with 3 different families yesterday because they are discharging either at the end of the week or the beginning of next week, and it takes We have worked as quick as 24 hours. Those are not preferred because you don't really have a lot of choices when you have to do that. But that's really what we deal with skilled nursing deciding they only have to give 48 hours notice. Most of them will give an idea. They won't necessarily give you an exact discharge date, but they will say, we're anticipating this day, and then they have what's called a Medicare meeting, usually on a Wednesday or Thursday, and that's when they give people the definitive, and for some reason they always like to discharge on Fridays. So,
Okay, so I have a question about that. So somebody gives you a date, so they give you an anticipated date. They say that we're anticipating that your loved one's gonna be able to be released in 10 days. They're anticipating, right? If you at that point take the advantage of the 10-day window and find a great community for your loved one to stay in, get all the paperwork done, then at the end of the 10 days, the rehab, the skilled nursing says, no, your loved one needs to stay another 10 days. Will the communities hold that bed for 10 days? Or a period of time?
9 times out of 10 they will, when they're in skilled nursing. There are some communities that, I don't like it when this happens. This is not, believe me, we try our hardest because we are advocating for the family for sure. But there are some communities, if they only have one opening, they may say, you have to at least go ahead and take financial possession so they can hold it, especially if they've already held it a week and a half, 2 weeks.
Okay.
That does not happen every day, and I don't ever want somebody to be scared of that. Most of the time, they will work with us. In fact, just to give you a little example, two of the families that I toured with yesterday, they said we want to discharge on Friday. Well, I explained to the families that one, it doesn't set the community up for success or the family up for success if you move them into a community on a Friday. It's a recipe for disaster.
So how come? Because I can answer this question. I know the answer. I feel like, ooh, I know that.
Yes.
But so tell us, why is that not setting the community up for
There's
success?
so much to do with their care plan, and they can't fully do that until the resident is in the community. The full-time nurse is who sets all of that up. The full-time nurse that's there Monday through Friday during the day is the one that makes sure they have all the meds, everything's in the care plan, so that whenever the weekend crew comes in the next day, everything's ready to go, and all they have to do is pull up that person's information. They know what time they get this medicine, what time they get that medicine, and what time they get a shower. All of that's done. If you try to discharge and move somebody in on a Friday, most of the time they don't get to the community till late in the afternoon, because they're not discharging them at 9 o'clock in the morning. And then you end up having meds that aren't there, and then that's not good.
So the short answer to that is they don't work weekends.
They do.
Well, no.
I mean,
The people who you need to get you checked in do not work weekends.
that is correct, yes.
Yeah.
They are on call on the
Right,
weekends.
correct.
Yes.
So that's the short answer, is they
Yes.
don't work weekends.
Yes.
It's also hard to get people to move you and your personal belongings on the weekends, or to pack you on the weekends. A lot of people in life work weekends. I work weekends. But, but a lot of people do not, and especially on a moment's notice. So it's very difficult, so very good. Okay, so Stephen, same question to you. What type of emergency situations do you most often hear from your clients or from people who are calling in and needing help unexpectedly?
Yeah, that's the exact emergency, is that they need help unexpectedly. And a lot of times it's from sons and daughters who call in and said, Mom or Dad is in the hospital. The doctors need somebody to have a healthcare power of attorney in place, or the financial people at the hospital need a financial power of attorney in place, or a guardianship. And so the emergency is they need all of these documents right now, right? And sometimes it is on a Friday afternoon, and we will work with people as much as we can, but I don't want to go to a hospital on the weekends if I don't have to, but sometimes we have to. So that's the biggest emergency, is that people don't plan for their incapacity. And I know this is all about what happens when you go back home, but that's the key. Everybody thinks estate planning is about what happens after you pass away? What happens to your stuff? But I think what's even more important is how do you want to be taken care of? Yeah, how do you want to be taken care of right now during your lifetime? That's the most important thing, right? And so you can make all of those decisions ahead of time instead of your family calling me at 4:30 on a Friday saying we need to get something done right now. And even if they're calling me on a Monday or Tuesday, if somebody says the doctors just came in and said Dad has dementia, and the doctor just gave us a note that said he can't sign documents anymore. Well, guess what? We can't do a power of attorney anymore. We can't do a healthcare power of attorney. That ship has sailed. So then we're stuck with guardianship. And guardianships, if we go to a court and want a guardianship hearing, it's usually 20 to 30 days into the future. Well, they need something right now, right? They called us because they need something like this hour, right? They need somebody to be able to make those decisions. And so there is something called an emergency guardianship, but that also means that you're going to have to go to court with me that very day. We're going to have to go to the judge, and we're going to have to prove to a judge that an emergency situation actually exists. And lately, that bar has gotten raised. It used to be, honestly, very easy. We'd go in there and say, there's an emergency. We need to place them someplace. And now the judge is like, well, is that really an emergency? Just the placement, right? And so it could depend on the judge that you get whether or not you're going to get the emergency. If not, you may have to wait 20 to 30 days before somebody will have the authority to even act on your behalf.
So what happens in that situation, Stephen, if you go before the judge for an emergency, or the judge looks at it and says, nope, doesn't look like an emergency to me, but you have a loved one at the hospital who needs to be placed in the hospital saying, your time's up, you have 2 days. You tell them, well, I'm sorry, we can't get guardianship because the judge is not going to see us for 30 days. What happens?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know what happens.
Okay.
That's more maybe your question. Yeah, I mean, if you don't have the authority, you don't have the authority, and that can create a lot of problems for the family, for trying to find a placement. The person may have to end up going home, and that may not be the right place to go, and that may actually exacerbate symptoms and make your situation even worse. Whereas if you just planned ahead, I think this is what you're talking about, if we just planned ahead and put somebody in charge, we wouldn't have to go to the court, we wouldn't have to rely on somebody that your family has never met before. Imagine making life-changing decisions on your behalf that somebody who you've never even met is making those decisions for you.
The person at the hospital or someone who is just checking a box and trying to move you right through the process.
Right. And a judge who you've never met before. And we have some, especially in Oklahoma County, we have some super kind judges, but they also have a job to do and they have a law to follow. And so, it's not just because they're like, we don't feel like it today. It's because there's been recent cases and laws coming down where they have to follow the law. They have to be careful too.
And their goal is to protect you.
Right, that's the ultimate goal.
Okay, very good. Well, now, hold on. This next
Okay.
one's for you, Stephen. So now you talked a little about what they don't have. So what are some of the key documents that would help the family and the loved one be prepared, or each of us be prepared if we go into the hospital? What are some of those key documents that we need?
Right, and obviously I advocate for a complete revocable living trust centered estate plan that kind of covers everything, finances, everything. But if we're just talking about health today, you need a health care power of attorney. Okay, and a lot of times there's some good online places, but a lot of times if you go on there to do a power of attorney, it's kind of an all-encompassing power of attorney, your finances and your health care. And I always tell families, your kids, the people closest to you better than anybody else. And your daughter may be fantastic with money, and your son may be horrible with money, right? That's actually the scenario we see. You give your son $10 and he's going to spend $30, right? So you don't want him in charge of the money. But maybe he's the one who has maybe for healthcare reasons, he's the right person for that role. Maybe it's the daughter for both of them, I don't know. But I really advocate having a financial power of attorney a healthcare power of attorney, so 2 separate documents, an advance directive or a living will, and that's the one that says, you know, if I'm in a persistent vegetative state, what do you want to happen? Do you want to be on machines, essentially? Do you want to get food? Do you want to get water? Do you want to get pain medication? I'll say that 90% of our clients, 95% of our clients say, I just want pain medication. Just pump me with morphine and let me go, right? I mean, you're brain dead, right? And so we really don't know what happens. And then the next one is HIPAA. Who is in charge? Who gets to look at your medical records? So your healthcare power of attorney and your HIPAA are usually the same, but I have found in practice that some places want an actual separate document just for the HIPAA. And so, you know, that's an easy printout.
Didn't that change some during COVID too? And where people had powers of attorney, but then they were saying you had to have HIPAA on top of it.
Right.
And so that's kind of where that double check
Yeah,
came.
right. And that is even more reason why I like to split everything up, right? But again, you know your kids better than anybody else. So pick people, and that's the other important thing, is pick people in these fiduciary roles. That's what we call them, fiduciaries. The people who you implicitly trust to make your healthcare decisions. And don't just, one more point.
No, you're fine.
A lot of families come in, a lot of moms, a lot of dads come into our office and say, well, I don't want to hurt their feelings, so I'm going to put both of them as co. Okay? If you ask all 3 of us the exact same question, we're going to give you 3 different opinions, right?
Maybe not.
Maybe not?
I agree.
Right.
So I think that, let's see, do you think they should?
No.
No, me
Yeah.
neither.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there you go, unanimous.
Yeah, on that point, yeah. I
On
think
that
we're all
point.
unanimous on that point.
And I'm the youngest of 3.
I'm the
Yeah.
oldest of 5.
And I am not my mom's POA.
Yeah,
Let's
oh,
just
well,
say
I
that.
am, but I can tell you right now,
Yeah.
I don't vote for it.
Yeah.
I don't want to, because when you do and, if you do co's, what does that mean?
Then the medical personnel, they don't know who to talk to, right? And especially if the document isn't written very well, right? Then Sally may walk in and say, I want this to happen. And so they start the procedure, and then Enrique comes in and has the exact same power. Sally went to lunch, and he stops the process. And then we've seen it with banks, where banks don't even want to touch a co-financial power of attorney because of that exact question. They don't want the liability, right? Sally comes in and takes mom's money. Enrique comes in and says, don't let Sally take the money. Okay, same thing with healthcare.
In my perspective, that they have to agree, and I can tell you my experience is, close your eyes and think about how your children acted when they were 12, and then that's exactly how they're going to act in emergency situations with their loved ones. And they rarely, I can't say never, because I have dealt with families that are amazingly well adjusted. That's the exception, not the rule. And getting them to agree in a very volatile situation is difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. The way to kind of make people feel better is I will put more than one person as the HIPAA, so the person who can look at the records, but be very clear that only one person has the decision-making authority, right? So then you can kind of have a committee of your children or whoever you trust implicitly to help that one person. But make no mistake, only one person is in charge at any given time.
I really like that. That's a good idea. So Lisa, what other documents? So we've now kind of talked about the legal documents. What are some of the other documents that are helpful with people who are in those emergency type situations?
They're pretty much the same. I mean, I'll be completely honest. That's what makes our job the hardest is when someone comes to us and needs placement, but nobody has POA. Dad was diagnosed with dementia, but because we usually recommend as soon as you get that diagnosis, you need to make sure those things are in place while they still have the mental capacity to make those decisions. But if they don't, and now they no longer have that, that's when you're in that situation. So if you don't have POA, then you end up having to go for emergency guardianship because that's really your only option at that point. They can't sign. So honestly, they're the same.
Okay.
They are the same.
So we talked a little bit Friday about location and where you put these. Do you remember what we talked about? I really liked Tracy. We had a third panelist. She talked about where to put them. her suggestion was to have them in an envelope on your refrigerator door that says, in case of emergency, so medical personnel, family members, if they're picking you up with an ambulance, your documents are right there, and including your list of medication, not drugs, sorry, your medications that you're on, that you would include that as well, so that people would know, and that they're easily accessible, and that paramedics would know to take that with them, and they rather than a family member having to find it later. Because I know if you think about it, if you ask me right now where my medical documents are, I'm not a good example. I have them, very proud, I have them, they're in a really nice little binder, and I'm the only person who knows where that binder is. So somebody else needs to know where that binder is, so please make sure that people know where that's at, okay? So good questions, or good answers, guys. Okay, so, so this is good. Lisa, tell us, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about returning home after their hospital stay?
Probably what I hear the most is they're discharging us with home health, so there will be a nurse out to visit or to help us. And what people don't understand is home health is not private duty. Private duty is the nurse the aide that comes out that helps you do things, helps you toilet, helps you bathe, all of those things. Home health is only coming out sometimes once a week to take your vitals, check your weight, make sure you're not losing weight, and then they're gone. And they may be there 45 minutes tops. If you're on therapy, they may come out a couple days a week for about 40, 45 minutes, and then they're gone too. But they're not there therapy will help bathe on occasion if it's part of the OT plan, but they are not there to help you prepare meals, to help with laundry, to help with all those things that now whatever physically has happened to you limits your ability to do that.
What does OT stand for?
Oh, I'm sorry. I do that all the time. Occupational therapy.
Okay.
There's physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy, and some people qualify for all three when they have something happen.
Okay. So it's the misconception is that when I leave the hospital, I'm going to be okay to go home and resume my regular life. Okay.
Pretty much, especially if they are allowing them to return home.
Okay.
Most of the time, a lot of times when there's been an accident, they send them to skilled nursing first, and then they let skilled handle the discharge issues. They let skilled start introducing what they need to do or make those recommendations of assisted living.
Okay. So the hospital is not an end-all anymore, it's a stepping stone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's correct.
And that's very different than what I think some of us have been historically used to. Oh, I'm gonna go to the hospital, they're going to do X, Y, Z, I will sit back and get round-the-clock care for several days, and then I'm gonna be well and be able to go home and resume my normal activity. And that's not the case anymore.
I will add to that most of the time what we see with seniors is if they have something that causes them to go to the hospital, even if it's not a fall or a break, if it's just pneumonia, or we see sepsis a lot after surgeries happens a lot. Something like that. Say they have 3 to 5 night hospital stays, now they qualify for skilled nursing, but just those 3 to 5 nights in a hospital where you're not getting up, now all of a sudden their mobility has changed drastically because what you don't use, you lose. So now they have to go to skilled nursing to try to get stronger to return home.
Okay. So Stephen, I'm gonna ask you the same question a little bit differently. What are some of the misconceptions with documents, legal documents, that people have thinking that there's always tomorrow? What are some of the things that they think? I guess the answer is they think they can call you on Friday and get it done.
Right. Well, and they think that they can always get the documents done. Like I said earlier, we'll get a son or a daughter saying, Dad or Mom, the doctor literally just gave us a diagnosis, wrote down that they can't drive anymore and shouldn't be entering into contracts. Can you get us a power of attorney? No, we can't. That, like I said earlier, that ship has passed. But I think also the misconception from a dangerous story point of view is that what we see, unfortunately, exactly what you just said, is that everybody thinks if you're going home, everything's okay. And what we see a lot, unfortunately, is somebody moves into the house thinking, well, I'm going to take care of mom or dad. Or the worst is the neighbor down the street moves in and says, you know, I've been having coffee with your mom for the last 10 years or maybe 6 months, and I just think it'd be better if I lived here. And we're literally now having to evict people from people's houses because these people who are moving in and they're really just taking advantage is kind of the horror stories that we're seeing over and over again lately.
So you're telling me the person who, in general, who has no home that they have to be responsible for, probably has no job because they have a lot of free time, and the person they're living with is perfectly willing to pack them up in 5 minutes to move them to your mother's house, is probably not the best person to let move into your mother's house and take care of her?
Exactly.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the distant loved one from someone else that they're so excited that they're 55 years old and never left the basement is not who you're wanting to move in to take care of your mother. And that they're probably going to end up being squatters that you have to evict later on.
Right, and we're seeing that more and more. Like I said earlier, 25 years of doing this, and in 25 years related to probate, well, just in my entire career, up until this last year and a half, I'd only evicted one person. I'd only had gotten one. I know they happen all the time, but this past year, and we've had a bunch, Shannon and I have had a bunch together in the last year and a half, where we are just constantly, it's gotten so bad that I now have an attorney who just does the evictions. We farm them out to them because it takes time out of my day to show up at eviction court to evict Sally because she moved in because she didn't have a job, and so this is her new job. That's the thinking, right? I'm moving in to take care of mom, and so I deserve all of this. And then it just creates problems later on when mom does die, because then Sally's like, well, I took care of mom for the last 3 years. It's all mine. And that goes to the estate planning part, but that's absolutely not true. Just because you took care of somebody doesn't mean you get their stuff.
It is something that you should be very aware of who you are letting and someone who's caring for your loved ones. I'll put it that way. Be aware where they're coming from, where they're living now, and their response is, oh yes, they would do a great job. Let me pack their stuff and get them over there. Probably you should be aware, because there's probably a reason. So be aware of that. I mean, because we have seen loved one estates this year with probates. It has been siblings, a lot of siblings, long-time quasi-girlfriends, boyfriends. I don't know if we've had a neighbor. Have we had neighbors?
I've had one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We missed that one.
Yeah.
We've just been lucky enough to have all the family.
Yeah.
And you also need to know these family members and the people who are evicting are not caring for your homes. They're tearing them up. So be aware of that too. So it's a long range issue.
Yeah, recently, I mean, within the last 6 months, we had two. One was a neighbor, and they just moved in. They didn't even ask the family. They just moved in. And that got, because now they're tenants, right? Now they're a tenant. And then another one was, we had a niece, I think she was a niece, move in too. And she even, like, I want to say she literally had people come in and build a wall to divide her part of what she thought was hers. So it can get really bad. Can I tell one story about dementia? Because this one happened, I guess, about maybe 6 years ago, maybe 7. But we had somebody who went home, dementia, and should not have been by herself, but that was the easiest solution for the family. And unfortunately, they kept, well, you have to have a phone, right, at your house, and she would always answer the phone. And she was on Social Security. I think at the time she was getting $1,100 a month on Social Security. Somebody finally got her for $19.99 a month for something. I don't know what it was. And once he had her for the $19.99, then he called her back and got her for another $19.99. And then he shared it, I guess, with his other telemarketing fraud friends network. And before we knew it, they were hitting her account whatever day her Social Security account was, her Social Security check would come in, let's just say on a Monday, on Tuesday, she was getting hit for $1,200. So every month she had a negative balance. For a while she was okay because she had more money to cover it, but her money just disappeared every month, like literally. She had a mortgage on her house before her family found out. She was already 7 months behind in her mortgage payments. They ended up foreclosing on the house, so she lost the house that she had actually owned for almost 20 years. And so it was just, we had to get a guardianship. Now that wasn't an emergency because we were coming up on the Tuesday, and a judge agreed that if we didn't get a guardianship in place immediately to close down those bank accounts, or her bank account, that her Social Security check was going to be gone again. And then we changed her phone number, but before we did, she got horrible phone calls from all these telemarketers who, like, where's my money?
Yeah, her previous friends.
Right. So that's just a horror story that can happen of somebody who goes home and everybody just thinks that it's going to be okay. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to be okay. You have to have a plan in place.
Yeah. So, Lisa, this one's for you. So I think we've talked a little bit about this, and we were going to rely on Tracy for a little bit of this, but how soon hospitals, how soon do they have to tell you they're going to discharge you? Do they have rules, or is it subjective? It depends.
I'm not sure what the rules are because I don't work for a hospital. I'm going to be honest with that, but I can tell you, and I won't name any hospital systems in my description. However, I will say there is one particular one in the city that loves to discharge on Fridays, and then they want to send the referral out and say, well, we need them out today. We need them out today, and I'm like, I'm sorry. I wish I could. I mean, I can do fast moves, but I can't do that fast. Because communities still have to gather all the information. So I don't know what their rules are and how much, and it's very possible that they've been telling families, because I hear that from skilled sometimes, where we've been telling them for 2 weeks what the tentative date was, and we finally had to say, look, this is what's going to happen. We are discharging on this date, and that's usually when they call us and don't leave it in the hands of the family, and they'll say, can you call the family?
Okay. Well, that's actually good to know that the skilled nursing hospitals do involve other services to help potentially get you some help, but usually at the last minute. They're not being proactive at that point. They're being reactive. They're being just as reactive as potentially family members are.
And some are better than others. I will say I don't want to lump all of them into that. There are some skilled nursings that pull us in from the very beginning. As soon as they get there, they start talking about discharge and what the plan is. Hospitals are not so much that way. They'll just discharge on the skilled as long as they've had 3 nights.
Does a family member get to pick which skilled nursing they go to?
They are supposed to. It is always your choice. And please, if you remember nothing else, always remember that whether you're in a community, you're discharging from a hospital or a skilled, your home health, your hospice, your skilled facility, it's always your choice. Now, of course, it's pending availability. What happens sometimes is the hospital wants to get someone out pretty quickly. So they just decide, oh, they have this insurance, I'm going to send it to this one because I think they have openings. And then they'll send it to 3, and the first one that accepts that patient, then they go to the family and say, okay, you're going to XYZ skilled nursing. They've accepted you. We're going to discharge tomorrow. What I usually tell people, and unfortunately the story that Shannon gave at the very beginning, if I can intercept that, I will do it every time. So if somebody ever calls me from the hospital saying, we don't know what's next, but I knew about you, and I kind of wanted to talk to you about what if this is the route we have to go. I always tell them, as soon as they start talking discharge, if they start recommending skilled nursing, they should give you a list. When they give you that list, please call me, because what they're giving is the list of who takes that insurance. I've been in and out of all of these places, so while that's not my primary focus, I will always tell people where I recommend.
is there a time when all the beds are full?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
What happens when all the beds are full?
You have to go to another, then they try for, you mean all of them, every option out
Yeah,
there?
I mean, I guess, I don't know if that's really realistic or not, but if you get a list and you have 5 on the list, 4 are full but 1 is not, then that kind of makes your decision for you, doesn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay.
And that is not necessarily something you can always plan for, because it's timing. It's really just comes down to timing. But I will say hospitals have their favorites. They know which ones will accept the most, so they're going to really focus on those, but those are not always the best.
No, so I have another question about that. So you have a skilled nursing or a rehab or an assisted living even, and if a patient, a loved one, has a relationship with that community, if their beds are full, but they have a relationship with Jane because Jane has attended events, Jane has toured, they've continued to stay in contact with her, is there probability of them finding a bed or helping her increase because that they have had that relationship before?
So you're saying community A has a relationship with Jane, but they don't have any openings.
Theoretically.
Will they help her? They will usually make recommendations and kind of say where they would stay away from or where they would try first. I don't normally say this is where I would stay away from, but I will say this is who I would contact first, and I would contact them in this order.
Okay. I've actually had 2 clients that have had relationships with communities. They've called for their husbands, and the hospital told them that they're full. When they called initially, they said, no, we're full, and then they called their contact there, and they ended up finding them beds both times at their communities because they knew the community.
Right.
And it was their primary choice, and they had a relationship. I was surprised both times.
And I now I see what you're saying. So yes, that has happened. So I will usually reach out to my contacts. When I have a call from somebody, I will shoot them a text and say, hey, do you have any openings? Most of the time I don't even give a name, but because I've worked with them so much, a lot of times I get a different answer. I had one time that I had recommended to a family, and we basically went around the case manager, and I hate to say that because I don't necessarily recommend that, but I was involved. They knew they were going to have to move once their skilled stay was done. So I had reached out. She told me they were recommending a skilled nursing facility I had never heard of, and I've been in this industry a long time. So I was like, let me reach out to a couple people. I sent a couple of texts. She said, yeah, I do. I have one that's opening tomorrow. When do they need it? I said, well, they're discharging in 2 days. They go back to the case manager, and they say, well, we got her into such and such. She said, they accepted you? She never even sent it. She just assumed that she never even sent it there and never asked them. She just sent it to the ones that she knew were going to accept quickly.
Correct, and who would have vacancies. So it's the same thing. If you've attended any of our sessions when we talk about senior communities, there are those communities that are in high demand. Their occupancy rate is 95, 99, 100%. They're full. They have a waiting list. It's the same with skilled nursing.
Yes.
Those that are in high demand, that give great service, like a 5-star hotel, that they're fully booked, right? So having those connections through services, through your own personal interactions, it is amazing how that will help you go to the top of the list, or that they will be able to then, instead of the standard answer, would you like to save, would you like fries with your burger, and your answer is no. You know, just you've been trained to say no automatically. So when you call these communities and they're full all the time, so rather than them answering no or full, they know, oh, I know Lisa. Lisa, you know what? We are full, but we have someone discharging tomorrow. Would your client like that bed? That's because you know somebody, rather than just a family member calling and saying, do you have any beds available? No, we're full, and hanging it and moving on. So that's where that connection comes. So it's really important. So you do have some choices ahead of time, and that's where you do your legwork. And it may be that you don't tour the community, but you talk to your friends. Your friends have gone to different skilled nursing, and they've had good experiences and bad experiences. Learn from them. Go visit them while they're in skilled nursing. It'd be a 2-for-1. You can be a great friend at the same time while you're eyeballing that skilled nursing. You never know when you might need it, right? Okay, so So guys, now we've kind of covered all the emergencies. Man, we covered a lot of dark stuff, didn't we? A lot of good stuff though. We gotta know those things. So the next question I have for you guys is we've talked a lot about documents. So Steve, I've got this one for you. So there are different documents out there for people with their houses. They can do wills, trusts, and often I will hear people that are in emergency situations and they'll say, it's not a problem, Shannon, if we hit an emergency situation, we're just gonna do a transfer upon death deed for my kids and they can have the house. How does that work?
Well, first it goes back to, does the person have capacity to do what they're going to do first, right? So by very definition, if it's an emergency, then they probably don't. And so you cannot do that transfer on death deed anymore. You can't change your bank accounts to pay on death beneficiaries. So the documents that you need to have are, like I talked about earlier, is a good solid estate plan that grows with you as your life changes. So what we recommend a lot is that people get a revocable living trust centered estate plan, have a revocable trust at the center of it, still have a will, but the will catches things that are not in the trust and it pours it back into the trust for distribution under the terms of the trust. Same documents I talked about, your financial power of attorney, your healthcare power of attorney, your advance directive called living will, HIPAA authorization, and all of that works together to provide an umbrella of protection around you. Going to the houses specifically, you put the title, so I always talk about Sally and Enrique, I don't know why, but Sally and Enrique are married, and right now their house is Sally and Enrique as joint tenants with right of survivorship, okay? So they think they're safe because if one of them dies, it automatically goes to the other one. But what if both of them die at the same time, or within a short amount of period? Then there's gonna have to be a probate to get it to whoever it's supposed to go to, okay? Next, if you had that property actually titled, instead of just Sally and Enrique, you had it titled as Sally and Enrique trustees of the Sally and Enrique Revocable Living Trust. They get incapacitated, that's what we're talking about here today, right? They become incapacitated, then their trustee just steps into their shoes, okay? You guys are all CEOs of your own lives right now, but if you become incapacitated, like every good business, there has to be a succession plan. So that is what your trust is. You have named your successor while you're alive to take care of you. And when we're talking about real estate in particular, because that property is in your trust, your successor trustee simply steps in your shoes and can sell it as the trustee.
Or maintain it.
Or maintain it, exactly. Pay the insurance, make sure that that Social Security check that you're getting every month goes to what it's supposed to go to, right? Now, don't have anything at all, then we get into an emergency situation and people say, well, we already said we can't do the transfer on death deed, but what if the property has to be sold because you need the money for something, because you're gonna move into wherever and you need that cash? Well, if we have to get a guardianship, then just because somebody is the guardian doesn't mean that they can just sell the property. Once a guardianship is established, everything that happens to your assets, if you're the one somebody has a guardianship over you, everything that happens to your things, your possessions, your real estate, has to get the approval of a judge to sell it.
So really the person who is named the guardian is just a reporter to the courts.
Essentially, right. They can still talk to like healthcare and make those decisions. But if we have to sell property, and it's not just like, I don't want to talk about probates, but if you die, then there's something called, if everybody consents, the property can just be sold very quickly, which we do. We call that a 239. But if not all the heirs agree, then we have to do it by auction. And unfortunately, the laws are written in Oklahoma that if you have a guardianship, that 239, that consent way to sell things is not available. So a property has to go up for an auction. Now, Shannon can still sell it, but she can tell you how frustrating it is. I always tell people it adds another 3 months and about $3,000 to that I'm going to take from their pocket for court costs, for just everything just to get that house sold. Where if you just had a plan in place, you had a successor CEO set up, then your family wouldn't have to waste that $3,000. $3,000 that could be spent on care, on medicines, on things that you actually need.
Okay, very good. Okay, so Lisa, this next one is for you. So we've talked about some different things, but I want you to kind of tell us the difference between them. Because I think probably this group knows a little bit about that, and some may know all of it. If you do, it's a great refresher. For those of us who don't know, this will help teach us. So what's the difference between rehab and skilled nursing?
Skilled nursing is much lighter. You can stay longer. So you're only going to do about one session of PT a day, 45 minutes to an hour, and then you're going to be in your room or doing whatever else. But if you're on traditional Medicare, you can get up to 100 days in skilled nursing. And I say up to, and I want to emphasize that because that is not a guarantee. It is all based on Medicare. If somebody stops progressing, or they regress, or they, anything like that, they can say, okay, we're done progressing. We're not going to get them back to where they were before they came in here. We're going to discharge. We're going to stop paying.
And that's skilled nursing.
And that is skilled nursing. Rehab is a great option for somebody. Most of the time it's younger people or younger seniors, but a lot of times it is seniors that have really kept up with their physical mobility because they can endure a lot more therapy in a day. If they have the ability to do up to 3 hours of therapy each day, then they qualify for rehab.
Okay.
So rehab is a much shorter stint. It's usually on average about a 2-week stay. I've seen it a little bit longer and I've seen it shorter. So but now I want to say this because the way I usually recommend if somebody's kind of teetering as to which one is the better option, usually rehab, they don't make it as easy to step down to skilled nursing. Per insurance, they get dinged, and when I say dinged, I mean, I don't really know what the ding means, but
It's a black mark on their principal's permanent record.
okay.
It's the only thing I can tell you.
And I don't know how it affects the money that they take in or anything, but I know that it is frowned upon for them to discharge from rehab to anywhere other than home or a home-like setting. So that can be assisted living, it can be independent living, but the goal is to get them back home. The goal is not to send them from rehab down to skilled. Now it is possible, and I've even recommended it to people many times, when they're getting discharged from skilled, if they're getting stronger and they're still getting stronger, but Medicare has determined that you're out of days, we're not gonna keep them any longer. I've recommended, have you asked them if they're a candidate for rehab? Try to get them to rehab, because it's more intensive, now they're stronger, now they can do a little bit more, it's shorter, you don't have as much time to plan at that point, but you know, hey, maybe if we can do this rehab, we can get back home.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. Okay, so then my next question. So you have skilled nursing and long-term care. What's the difference between the two of those?
Okay, that's a really good question. Skilled nursing is paid for by Medicare, and it's meant to get someone stronger and better. Long-term care is not paid for by Medicare. The only insurance that pays for long-term care is Medicaid. So if someone does not qualify for Medicaid, they are paying out of pocket, just like they would for assisted living. Long-term care is the most expensive form of care there is. It ranges from anywhere from about $8,000 a month for a shared room. You got a little roommate and a bed right next to you, up to about $15,000 to $16,000 for a private. So we try very hard to keep people out of long-term care.
Okay, so is long-term care the new politically correct name for the home?
It is the new politically correct name for a nursing home.
Okay. I'm just trying, because we hear a lot of names, guys.
Yeah. Some
And we
people
hear a lot of terms, and
Yeah.
we change the terms and what they mean, so I wanted to make sure
Yes.
at least you know today what these terms mean, right? So it's important.
I like to point out, and it's usually for, honestly, an older generation, when you guys went to see loved ones, right, when you're preparing and you remember going mom or your grandma in the nursing home, and I use quotation marks because we don't like that phrase anymore. That was all there was then. That was all there was for seniors that couldn't live at home anymore. So I always correct people when they call assisted living the nursing home, because they are nothing like a nursing home. And there is still that idea in their head, I never want to go to the nursing home. I went to see my mom there or my grandma there and it was awful. And it's not like that anymore. So yes, long-term care is the new nursing home.
Okay, well that helps. Again, you gotta be on a level playing field so you know what people are talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so guys, so my last question, is there anything, Stephen, I'll have you start, have we missed anything before we open it up to Q&A that we need to cover today that we've not talked about yet?
Just get a plan in place. That's the key. And just calling me and talking about it and then not doing it is not a plan, because we've gotten people who do that as well. So talk to an attorney. I always tell people, talk to 2 or 3 attorneys. Like I said in the very beginning, this is an ongoing process. Just because you get it, it's not just one and done. It is, you get it done and it grows and it changes as your life changes, right? That CEO, that successor CEO that you put in place, they may have died. They may have moved to another country or across the country. So you need to constantly update all of this so that it aligns with whatever is happening in your life right now. So plan for now, because it's going to grow.
Well, and I'm gonna put a plug in here. Stephen said something really important. He said that you can come and have a consultation with him. So that initial consultation with you is a little bit like an interview, isn't it? So
Absolutely.
There's not a fee. You're
Right.
talking about big picture, talking about how you can help them. And what he said that was really smart, guys, is that you interview more than one person. It's just like I tell people that you should interview more than one realtor. We hope we'll all do a good job. I mean, it is what it is. But it's about personalities and knowing who you're going to work well with long term. And so Stephen does a great job of being able to have that conversation with you and giving you that big picture and starting there. But he is correct. Having the first conversation does not mean you finished. And I know some people that have that first conversation and then they don't go back. And they need to go back. So we want to make sure that they do that. That's really important. Okay, so Lisa, anything that we've not covered that we need to cover today?
No, I think honestly, I wish I would have invited my mother to this.
I did invite my mother.
I wish I would have.
I did, she's right there.
You just called me out.
Well, I see that you guys are videoing. I'm thinking I should probably send that to my mom, but then she might be mad at me because I just called her out. Because I think she could have really benefited. We lost my dad 2 years ago unexpectedly, and I have been on my mom for 2 years to meet with somebody. She bought a new house. She downsized. It is not in a trust. It should be. It is. She has all of her stuff. She has
That's
her
good.
POA. She has her health care, her financial. She has all that. But her estate, per se, is not taken care of because my dad is no longer the successor.
Yep.
And
So
it's
plan.
important.
That's
It's
the
important.
number one thing we're wanting to walk away with.
Plan.
Okay, so now we're ready for questions. So guys,
I don't know
I'm
who
going to
this
remind
is.
you, we're going to call on you when you tell us, give us your question. I'm going to repeat it so everybody can hear, and then they're going to answer. Okay? So what's your question,
This
ma'am?
is for Stephen.
Uh-oh.
Okay, for Stephen.
Stephen, we've talked about all these documents, and we've talked about the revocable living trust, which I've had for 25 years.
It's great.
But I would like for you to give an estimate of cost so that the ones that are going to interview you and make a decision to get their plan in place,
Right.
what should they expect to pay?
Great question.
That
Okay,
is a
so
good question.
guys, her question is, she's had a trust, and I'm gonna footnote yours for 25 years. Have you had yours reviewed?
I have once a year.
Good job.
I meet with my attorney and we go over, and there've been many changes.
Well,
And
she-
I
That's good.
pay for those changes.
Good
Absolutely.
job. Okay, so her question is,
That's what
is what is a ballpark figure for your process for a trust? What does that look like? What does that cost? What should people expect?
That is a great question. And for most people, so I believe it's under, if your assets are under, I think it's $13.9 million right now, then what I'm going to give you a price for pretty much applies to everybody, right?
If you're above that, if you need an extra daughter, let me know. I have a job, I have a house, and I'm very used to it.
And it's times two. So if you're married, it's actually $26 million, okay? So if you're not in that top zero, and I did the calculations, if you're not in that top 0.5% of the United States that has over that amount, then we have pretty much a trust set up that we use for everybody. Now, we do customize it for everybody, right? Because like you're talking about changes, and that's the other thing is you need to go with your attorney, just like you go to your doctor, your insurance provider. You need to talk to these financial professionals every single year to see where you are. For a single person, we charge $3,150 for that package, and it includes the trust, pour over will, financial power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, your advance directive, your HIPAA authorization. We also do basically a bill of sale where you're selling everything, your clothes, furniture, appliances to your trust. It just says, going forward, my clothes belong to my trust, okay? And we also do one real estate deed into your trust for you. So for a single person, it's $3,150. For a married couple, it's $3,550, okay? And then we also will help you fund it. That's an additional cost. And right now we're actually working on something that I think people are going to like, to kind of align all of their assets on a yearly basis with their trust. So in other words, make certain that our clients are actually changing their bank accounts. If they buy another piece of property, if they've downsized, making sure that new place is in the name of the trust. Because that's actually the biggest thing we see is, and I know your question was just about price, but one of the biggest things we see is that people will sell their home that they raised their family in, downsize, and they don't tell Shannon. They don't tell the title company that they have a trust. And all of a sudden we have to probate that asset when they pass away. So those are our prices, $3,150 and $3,550.
Okay, very good.
Can I ask a tag-along question?
Sure.
Sure.
I mean, it's probably more beneficial for me, but what age do you recommend someone
Oh, that's a
starting
good
to
question.
do that?
So the question, you all heard, what age?
Yeah, what age do I recommend you get a revocable living trust centered package wherever you are in your lifetime? And in fact,
Like
today, right? But yeah, I also mean we have a
Kids could.
yes. So we have a lot of young ladies working for us who one of them just had a baby, and that's where we started thinking. She's like, I don't have any of this in place. Like, what happens to us right now, right? If something were to happen to us, who raises our child? Who is going to be in charge of that child's money? Because you can't give a child $100,000 or $50,000, right? So for those situations, I say have your insurance policy, if you're a young couple, pay into your trust, and then have your trustee administer that money for that child for their lifetime, or until they're 21 or 25 or whatever. But the right age for anybody is whatever age you are right now. Get your trust right now.
And guys, I'm gonna tell you something. I said earlier, I'm the oldest of 5. All of my siblings are single. They're all over 21. If they don't have a power of attorney or a HIPAA, they go into the hospital, the rest of us may never be notified. And that's really important. So think about if you have grandchildren who are of age, over 18, HIPAA no longer protects them. Their mom cannot walk in the hospital and say, you have my son here, I want to know about him. And they'll say, well, that's good, but do you have a power of attorney, or are you on the HIPAA list? And if your answer is, then that probably means no, and they don't have to answer you. So it's very important. So it's something that what you're learning here is not just for you, but it's also for your family, for your children, and your grandchildren. So it's something you should be really aware of.
Yeah, then they're going to have to get a guardianship over their child who literally just turned 18.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. Barbara, what question do you have?
Is the HIPAA built into a trust?
No, so it's part of the
Into the
health care power of attorney, right, and a separate HIPAA document. So we actually do two. We do a healthcare power of attorney and a HIPAA authorization.
So he double dips to make sure it's covered
The HIPAA's
completely.
part of the healthcare.
Two separate documents.
Oh, it's two separate.
Right. So the healthcare documents that I recommend everybody has as a base are your healthcare power of attorney, your HIPAA authorization, who can look at your medical records, and then third is your living will or advance directive. Okay.
So that's a good one. Okay, Kathy, what question do you have?
But I've got that set up with my doctor.
Okay, so her statement is she has it set up with her doctor. Well, that's great. But if you have an emergency on the weekend and they don't tap into that doctor, or if you're out of state, or your family wants to know, they're not going to look that up and contact your family for you. The family needs to have that. They won't necessarily connect the dots for you.
Yeah, and let me just follow up on that because you brought up a really good point about what Tracy said. She said paste it to tape all your documents to your wall, and that is absolutely true. I remember when my dad passed away in, I think, 2017, but I remember going home to visit, and my mom had done that exact thing for EMS because she was calling EMS about once a month for my dad, and so everything was literally taped to the wall. I can't tell you how important that is.
Smart.
And yes, you also, your primary care, your GP probably has that information. What we do is for our clients, we pay for their first year of a service called DocuBank. Is it DocuBank? Right, absolutely. And so what we do is we upload the healthcare power of attorney, the HIPAA authorization, the advance directive. We state, or they put in there, our clients do, what their medical conditions are, what allergies they have, who their emergency contacts are, because if your doctor has it, that's fantastic, and if they're part of a network, then hopefully the network can tap in and look. But if you're on vacation, if I heard you guys talking about a cruise ship earlier, if you're on that cruise ship, then how are they going to know who your emergency contact is, right? And so you carry this little emergency card, and they immediately know, oh, call Sally or Enrique as your emergency contact, right? And then on the back, they can call the number and they will fax it to the medical personnel, because you can't email medical. That's a violation of HIPAA.
They're the only ones who have fax machines left.
Right, and us, because of that reason.
Very good, very good. Great. You get a good big gold star up here, by the way. I'm going to have you as one of my panelists in the future, because you knew what he was talking about with the thing. You're the first person I've seen that has done that.
DocuBank?
The DocuBank.
I'll tell you the issue that I have with DocuBank is that, before my husband, passed away, we were checking in at the heart hospital. That person had never heard of it. Same with Mercy, they'd never heard of it. So, it's just, that's my concern.
Yeah.
I mean, I can give it to them and tell them what it is.
Right.
But if they just pass on it, that's.
Yeah, so what I've advised our clients for that specific reason, because that's come up, is you call the number on the back and ask Mercy, whoever it is, what's your fax number? Because they all have one. It's that little weird machine sitting in the back,
Oh, I know.
right? and just say, what's your fax number? And so, and then for us, sometimes our clients will just call me at 2, 3 in the morning, and thanks to technology, I can fax from my phone without getting out of bed. So.
Okay. Very good. Okay, what other questions? You had a question up here, yes, ma'am.
So, first of all, I have all my documents in a 3-ring binder by my nightstand.
Good for you.
It's called The Gift.
It's a
Yes.
wonderful thing.
Yes.
It is, yeah.
So I've got it done, and
And-
my
and
friends,
I'm gonna do my,
think I'm weird,
no,
but I said, listen, you're supposed to do it. It's
That's
your
right.
job. They just don't care. They just say their kids have to do it. I go, oh my goodness. Anyway, so don't give me one.
Yeah.
okay, so hold on, I'm gonna cut just 1 second, I'm gonna do a quick plug for where you got the gift. So the gift is a product of Villages OKC.
Yep.
And it's a wonderful program. So if you have questions about the gift and you want that wonderful binder that kind of walks you through it, and it's really about how you live, not how you die, but it helps your family. So good job, big gold star. Okay, yes ma'am, what's your question?
I want to know exactly what she was saying. Is the POA advance directive in HIPAA, because I have in the gift, the POA, the advance directive, but I can't say that I know what HIPAA is. Would the POA and the advance directive in the gift be sufficient?
So it depends on how it was written. So her question specifically was, can the HIPAA be wrapped up into the power of attorney?
And advance directive by HIPAA.
Right. So I have seen, in fact, in mine also, my healthcare power of attorney, it also names the exact same people as your HIPAA people. But in practice, what we have seen is that some facilities want a separate document specifically stating who has HIPAA authorization. So that's why we do, just to cover, right? Just as a cover, right? And it's 3 pieces of paper, so why not, you know?
So it is an additional, I can tell you, I'm a facilitator for that class, and we use the power of attorney and the advanced directive, the HIP is not in there. So if you'll remind me, we'll talk to villages and have them add that in, because it's an extra form that they do not have in that. It's not in
Right.
my binder.
Okay, so my question, is, I, take in my social security, but I, raise my grandchild. And so I want to make sure that she's gonna continue to get my social security to pay for her, she's a minor. And so, how would I go about that?
So I don't know the answer to that as far as Social Security goes. But a lot of times, I'll just use retirement as an example. So if you know you're going to be continue and whoever your program is will continue to pay out that retirement, or maybe it's into a lump sum, then what we do is we have the retirement system pay out into the trust. And then the trust will slowly distribute that money under what's called a HEMS standard. It's an IRS term for health, education, maintenance, and support. So whoever you put as the trustee to watch that money, to be the fiduciary for that money, can make distributions to your grandchild for those purposes during their minor years. And then maybe once they get to 21 or 25 or even 30, then they can get whatever the final, whatever the lump sum is that's left over.
Okay, so that would be a trust.
That would be a trust, correct?
Okay, but that's not social security.
That's not Social Security, yeah.
I would
Because,
tell you,
once we start taking our social security and then we're taking care of her, and then I'm gone, then.
I would tell you that you would probably would benefit you to have a conversation with Stephen afterwards, a little bit more specific, especially with guardianship and with grandchildren, to be able to know about beneficiaries. So I'll tell you that would be a really good conversation. That's where that one-off really comes in. So very good. Okay. Yes, Miss Betty, what's your question?
What I don't understand is, I wanna update my will. I have no family here in Oklahoma. I'm going to visit my daughter for Christmas. Do I get an attorney when I'm going to address all of these things? Or does she have to come to Oklahoma and talk to the attorney with me here for property and retirement money and all that?
Okay, let me repeat that so everybody can hear it. So her question, it's a really good question too, Betty, is she lives here in Oklahoma, her family lives in Texas, she has a will. Should she utilize an Oklahoma attorney or a Texas attorney? What does that look like when you cross state lines?
So because you live here, I would get an Oklahoma attorney and make sure that your last will or your trust, whatever your documents are, comply with Oklahoma law first, right? Because if you're living here, then probably if something's going to happen, the percentage of whatever's going to happen is going to happen here, right? Not to say that it won't happen someplace else, but go ahead.
But she wouldn't have to, for example, be here to sign anything like for me to sign?
No, absolutely not. No, absolutely not, because it's your document, right? And if we're just talking about a last will and testament, then you're the only one that signs that.
But what about like for property and setting up a trust and all that?
Okay, so if you want to set up a trust, and let's say that you want to be the trustee right now, you want to, because you're the CEO of your life right now, right, Ms. Betty? So we could set up a trust for you, and then all of those properties would be, the title would be deeded from your personal name to the name of your trust, okay? And we don't need your daughter here to do that, because she doesn't have to do anything. Now,
Make sure she has the power to do everything.
right, so in those documents, the trigger would be incapacity, like we were talking about earlier. So if you become incapacitated, or sometimes we have parents come in and say, you know what, I'm done being the CEO, right? And that's okay too, right? I mean, that's a great acknowledgement. I'm done. Let's let my daughter take over.
I'm
Right, absolutely.
And before they kick me off, but you know, just have it done now.
Yes.
So that if something unexpectedly happens,
Right,
I've got it set up.
right. Because if you don't do it now, while you can do it,
Yeah.
then it's a guardianship later on.
Yeah, yeah.
And you have multiple daughters, you have more than one daughter, so you have a good tribe to be able to help you, a good group that you can kind of divvy everything up how you want to do it now.
Well,
Right.
I agree with that family thing where when you have multiple family members with their hands in the pot, everybody wants to bake the cake differently.
That's
So
true.
I'm just gonna have one person.
Exactly.
Smart.
Absolutely.
Smart, good for you, Betty. Good. Okay, Miss Kathy, what's your question?
So, the difference between a will and a trust?
Right. So a last will and testament gives a judge guidance. Notice I just said judge.
Gotcha.
A judge guidance on what you want to happen to your assets. Okay. So whether you have a will or don't have a will, your estate will most likely need to go through the probate process. Okay. Versus a revocable living trust or a living trust, revocable trust, they all mean the same thing. Again, you name yourself as the trustee of that trust, so you control all of those assets. And then if you were to become incapacitated, or you just, like I said, you resign as CEO, right? Then whoever you have put as your successor trustee just steps into your shoes for incapacity, like I said, I think is the most important thing. But then also once you pass away, instead of them having to go to probate court, the trustee just reads the document. They usually ask an attorney to help them and distribute the assets under the terms of that trust. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and you had a question?
I don't know if I misunderstood you or not, but, payment on death for financial accounts, did I hear you say that isn't anymore, or?
Is there questions about payment on death?
Yeah, no, those are still very effective. In fact, we had somebody come in recently who they lived in an apartment. They did not have a car. The only money that they were coming in on a monthly basis was their Social Security check. They had no other assets. Okay, so why would you get a trust, right? I think you still need to have those other documents, your healthcare, financial, all of those important documents. But for her bank account, you know, if she passed away in the middle of the month and whatever money was left over from her Social Security, say it's $200 or $300, right? If you're lucky nowadays, right? Then she could put a pay on death beneficiary on her bank account. So she could put a daughter or a son or whoever she wants, and then they would just go to the bank with their death certificate, and get that $200. Okay, so it's still very much an option, absolutely.
That's what I
Okay.
misunderstood what you said.
Yes, Miss Betty?
On the bank account, if you have and or on your bank account, so it's me and or my daughter, do
Right.
I need a pay on death? And does it stop her doing any money transactions if I die, so the account has her name on it and it says and or?
Okay, so the question is her daughter's name, if you have somebody's name on your checking account and it's and or, does that hinder them if you pass, can they still have access to your account? And, that's the big question, correct?
She needs a POD.
And do you need to pay upon death? Yes, sorry, I left that part out.
They pay on
Yeah, usually the answer is no to that question, because if you put somebody as and on your bank account, guess what? You've just given them your bank account. So if you had $50,000 in your bank and you put your son as and Miss Betty and Enrique, Enrique owns that money just as much as you do. And you might think, well, that's okay, because I trust Enrique, right? What if Enrique gets married and now his new wife, who you do not like, says, ooh, I want to go on a vacation. You see what I'm saying? So the better option is to put that bank account in your trust and then name a successor trustee. So if something happens to you, your successor trustee just takes over and can administer that money during your lifetime for your incapacity to pay for things.
Does that have a person's name on the bank account and they can access it?
Yes.
At any time.
Because my daughter's like my executor. I mean, you know, she monitors
Right. Yes, I mean, if she wanted to go rogue, she could take, and we had that happen, in February. A mom put her son, she had a son and a daughter. The daughter lived in, I think, South Carolina, and so she just put the son because he lived here, and guess what? He moved in with her too. And then once he moved in, he started to see, I mean, this is all in my mind what happened. He started to look at the bank statements, and he was like, oh, mom had a little over $300,000. Well, guess what? When the sister contacted me in August, she didn't have $300,000 anymore. He had been going on trips and just blowing the money.
So be aware, it's something to be aware of. Yes, Miss Barbara.
At first, I put my niece on my checking account, and it was valid while I was alive, but when I died, it was no longer going to be valid, so they changed the kind of account it was.
Yeah, so you need to talk with your whatever bank you're working at, and because there's so many different options you can choose. For example, some people come and say, kind of that situation, and I ask them, are you a signatory on the bank account, or are you and also owner on the account? Because that's a huge difference, right? So a signatory could just be somebody who can write your checks for you, help you pay your bills. But once you die, that signatory goes away, because now the bank's not going to let her. They don't want the liability of somebody coming out and writing a check to themselves for $30,000.
So signatory dies with you, but the POD
Pays on death.
Pays on death, right? So
and the and or
you're giving ownership.
are ownership.
Yeah. So have a really good, solid conversation with whoever your banker is. Don't talk to the tellers, but ask to talk to somebody in one of the side offices.
Have a consultation. So actually, that was a
Right.
really good cheat sheet. So I'm going to say this so everybody can hear it, make sure you can hear it. Signatory, if it's a signatory checking account, it dies with the person who owns the account. If it's and or, you are sharing ownership. If it's pay upon death, then that's the person who gets it when they pass. That's a really good cheat sheet, so I like that. So that's a good explanation. Yeah, so good explanation. Okay, Miss Gloria, you are our last question of the day.
Oh, great.
Yeah, she's checking to make sure it's good now.
I'm not sure, really, there were sort of two, but
Okay.
Lisa, it's, call her first on a lot of this. How do we call you if I don't have a phone number?
Oh, very good.
Or-
Okay, so the question is, how does she get hold of Lisa when it says call you first? Well, this is gonna be the last, one of the things I'm gonna tell in my little recap. Back here at the back of the room, you do need to stop today because you've got great information from Stephen back there. It's about his Cortes law firm, and then you also have some great information back there about Lisa and her company. It'll have her contact information and exactly what they do. And on your evaluation forms, at the bottom of it, if you want additional information, you can write their name, and then we will get them in contact with you so that you can get additional information from there as well. Okay, so two different ways, back at the back of the tables and on your evaluation forms. And what was your second question, Gloria?
It's on Google too,
Oh.
I looked her up.
Okay, she's on Google.
See,
Okay.
Can I-
Girl Service.
And I would like to add that I am waiting on I ran completely out of business cards, and it is on order. So if you want, I give out my cell phone number, but it is not on that form back there, so on that card. So I will write my name and my cell phone number on that for you as well.
Okay, so, and then Gloria, what was your last question?
Okay, I had a trust, cause my dad had a trust, it went to me after his death in, '02, so set up the trust. And, the bank got a copy, my banking says in the trust. And so my daughter came in from out of town, and I wanted to make sure, that she signed a card that she could sign in case I'm in the hospital or whatever. And they said, nope, it doesn't, we don't have, I said, how did you set up the trust and the banking, all the information, statements, bank checks and all, in the name of the trust, and yet you said that you can't find the trust, so therefore she can't sign,
Okay, so she has some issues with the bank, which I can tell you is not an uncommon thing. And it's good that you took her in before you had an emergency, so you knew how to be able to hopefully take care of it. They still haven't taken care of it.
Nope, they wouldn't
Okay.
do it.
So there's a controversy between where the trust is, the trust, and who's able to sign on the account.
Sure.
Okay, so I can tell you probably need to
Yeah.
have a conversation with Stephen and be
Yeah.
able to talk through that, and then also, so you'll know what questions to ask the bank. Because guys, I'm gonna tell you the best thing about these guys up here is they may not have all the right answers, and I really appreciate the times when I hear Stephen say, no, that's not my specialty. But what they're really good at is knowing what questions you need to ask of the right person, and if they don't have that answer, they'll get it for you. So guys, that's more valuable than someone telling you they know all the answers. Okay? Yes?
Can I just make one comment about, we've had a lot of discussion about trust, and I am so glad because that is something that comes up in my conversations all the time, especially when it comes to Medicaid planning. People don't understand that it goes back 5 years on your assets. So if somebody is going to need help paying for their care, long-term care, that sort of thing, and they have not done a trust, I've had people say, oh, well, we'll just go get a trust. It's not gonna work, because now mom has this house, because maybe they don't wanna sell it, maybe it's been in the family a long time, now it's in mom's name, and it's gonna be passed on to this kid or that kid. They did not protect that house, and to qualify for Medicaid, the home counts. So 5 years, just remember that. If it's not set up and something happens, it's still liable.
And I'm gonna tell you guys, that's a whole nother seminar, so we're gonna end on that one. So let's thank our panelists for being here today. They did a great job. Great stopping point. Thank you so much.